The story you're about to hear challenges the deepest foundations of what we call history. We grow up believing that human civilization unfolded as a clean, upward line, from primitive beginnings toward greater knowledge, better tools, and more advanced ideas. But what if that line is an illusion? What if the real story is far more chaotic, far more violent, and far more mysterious than any textbook dares to admit? For centuries, the 17th century has been described as a chapter of political conflict, dynastic struggles, and climate anomalies. But when we peel back the layers, when we stop accepting the surface narrative and look deeper, we find something far more unsettling. We find clues hinting that humanity may have suffered a worldwide catastrophe so devastating that it erased entire cities, technologies, industries, and perhaps even entire civilizations from our collective memory. What you're about to explore is not a simple retelling of events. It's an investigation into the hidden apocalypse of the early 1600s, a reset so profound that our modern world might be built on the ashes of a forgotten one. And the truth may have been hiding in plain sight. A century that begins in darkness. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the sun has disappeared. Not behind clouds, not behind storms, gone. Hidden behind a veil so thick that daylight becomes a gray twilight, and summer never arrives. This is not fiction. This is history. Contemporary writers describe the early 1600s as years without summer, years when the sky dimmed and the temperature plunged. Crops failed across continents, millions starved, entire regions fell into lawlessness. Some poems describe the sky as blackened and silent, as if smoke from a burning world drifted endlessly across the heavens. And in Russia, poet Konstantin Belmont wrote that the land plunged into darkness for 3 long years. People wandered like shadows, animals died, famine became so brutal that survival stripped away every layer of civilization. And if this had been a localized tragedy, we might accept the official explanation. Historians point to the eruption of the Huayna Putina volcano in Peru in 1600, an explosion so massive that it sent ash into the stratosphere and dimmed sunlight worldwide. But does a volcanic explosion explain everything? Why do some accounts describe the sky as glowing, not darkening? Why do legends mention battles in the heavens, firestorms, and birds of strange metal? Why do so many regions across the world record similar devastation, yet, strangely, not all in the same year? Something doesn't quite add up. The famine was real. The darkness was real. But the cause? The cause might not have been natural at all. Some researchers suggest this wasn't a volcanic winter, but a nuclear winter long before nuclear weapons were known to exist. A lost world of giant structures. Official history insists that ancient civilizations built everything with simple tools, chisels, ropes, levers, stone hammers. Yet across the planet we find evidence of massive stone structures that defy our understanding. Megaliths carved with precision, cities built from blocks so large modern machinery struggles to move them. What if the world before the 1600s was more advanced than we think? Some fringe researchers propose the existence of enormous silicon-based trees, towering natural formations the size of skyscrapers. They argue these may have been ancient geological wonders or remnants of an unknown prehistoric engineering culture. According to this controversial idea, these structures burned in global firestorms, leaving behind ash that hardened into the clay layers we now build bricks from. It sounds fantastical until we examine the evidence. Coal slag and common clay share nearly identical chemical compositions. Much of Europe and Asia rests on a strangely uniform layer of clay several meters thick. And after the 1600s, architecture worldwide shifts dramatically from stone to brick, as if the raw materials changed overnight. Could it be that humanity rebuilt its world literally from the ashes of an older one?
An industry that disappears. Let's leave legend for a moment and turn to something concrete: industry. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Moscow was a thriving metallurgical center. It produced cannons, bells, and weapons. Skilled craftsmen from Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands worked in its foundries. Technology was advancing, not declining. Then suddenly, everything stops. By the early 1600s, Russia seems to forget how to make iron altogether. Cannons must be imported, tools must be imported, even basic metal products must be purchased from abroad. The country that once cast advanced artillery becomes dependent on Swedish iron and Dutch merchants. What happened to the factories? What happened to the craftsmen? What happened to the technology? The official answer blames war and political instability. But wars don't erase knowledge. They disrupt, yes, but they don't cause entire industries to be forgotten. Knowledge persists. Skills survive. Unless the factories themselves were destroyed. Unless the cities that held them were uninhabitable. Unless a deeper catastrophe scorched the land. Documents from the 1620s and 1630s show desperate attempts to rebuild metallurgy using primitive tools. Small workshops in isolated villages struggle to produce poor-quality muskets and crude iron bars. State orders skyrocket, but production barely limps along. This wasn't a temporary setback, it was a collapse.
The strange rise of foreign factories. Then something odd happens. Foreign engineers, mostly Dutch, arrive in Russia and establish new ironworks, but they don't build them in cities. They don't build them near ore deposits. They don't build them near skilled workers. They build them in the middle of nowhere, on empty fields, in remote forests, near small rivers far from any supply chain. Why would anyone build a factory dozens of kilometers from ore, charcoal, and labor? Why endure the impossible logistics of hauling material over muddy 17th century roads? Unless the cities were unsafe, unless the cities were contaminated, unless something invisible, radiation, toxins, fallout, made urban areas deadly. And here, the official narrative collapses completely. Why did foreign investors choose remote, rural fields over established cities like Tula or Moscow? Why did they build near ancient Gorodishye, hill forts that look suspiciously like survival settlements? It's almost as if the countryside was the only place where life could continue.
Were they rebuilding or restoring? When we study these strange factory sites, we notice something even more surprising. They weren't built from scratch. They were built on top of older structures. Old dams, old waterworks, old foundations. It's as if the foreigners weren't pioneering new industry. They were restarting an old one, reawakening sleeping technology, using the remnants of a lost infrastructure. Imagine survivors of a catastrophe scavenging the ruins of a once advanced world. They find broken turbines, shattered furnaces, half-buried dams. They don't understand how they were built,
but they can repair them. They can copy them. They can imitate their function even if they don't grasp their design. This might explain why these early 1600s factories built in a supposedly primitive era were surprisingly advanced. Water-powered furnaces, hydraulic hammers, boring machines for artillery, centuries ahead of their time. Reinvention or restoration? The evidence leans toward restoration.
Exporting cannons to Europe. By 1646, barely a decade after these factories were established, Russia begins exporting cannons. Not just a few, hundreds. High-quality artillery shipped to the Netherlands, the most advanced naval and industrial power of the age. How does a country that forgot metallurgy suddenly outcompete Europe? Unless the knowledge wasn't new, unless it was rediscovered, unless it came from the remnants of a lost world someone didn't want us to remember. Within a generation, Russia goes from technological collapse to global weapons producer. That doesn't happen without a hidden foundation. Something survived, something powerful, and someone knew where to find it.
The year the world lost its memory. When historians look at the early 17th century, something jumps out immediately. Not what is written, but what isn't. There is a strange silence in the record. Whole cities disappear from maps. Whole families vanish from genealogies. Whole events simply don't exist. Look at any European archive. You'll find detailed records from the 1500s. Taxes, births, trade logs, weather reports, paintings, letters, manuscripts. Then suddenly, between 1600 and 1650, the paper trail thins dramatically. It's as if humanity simply forgot how to write things down. Scholars claim wars caused the gaps, fires, loss of documents, political change. But the scale of disappearance is far too large and far too synchronized. Why would Italy, Sweden, Russia, France, Persia, the Ottoman Empire, India, and Japan all simultaneously lose archives? Why do dozens of cities suddenly redraw their boundaries and street layouts right after this mysterious dark age? Why do so many buildings across continents share identical burn marks and soot layers dated to the same century? The deeper we look, the more it appears that something vast happened, something that reshaped the world but was carefully erased afterward. The Great Fires, natural or engineered? Historians often describe enormous city fires in the 1600s. The Great Fire of Moscow, 1626. The Great Fire of London, 1666. The Great Fire of Edo, 1657. Urban firestorms across Germany, Poland, Sweden, Denmark. But here is the mystery. Almost every major fire shares the same pattern. 1. Sudden ignition in multiple locations at once. 2. Firestorms strong enough to melt metal. 3. Buildings burned from the inside out. 4. Survivors reporting a wall of fire falling from the sky. And even stranger, when these cities were rebuilt, they often built new foundations directly over the old ones. But the old ones were melted, stone warped, bricks fused, cellars turned into glass-like tunnels. Fire cannot melt stone cellars in multiple European cities. Something else did. In some locations, analysts have measured vitrified layers, stone turned to glass by intense heat. Normally, this requires temperatures above 1600 degrees Celsius. No ordinary urban fire reaches that, unless the fires weren't ordinary. unless the destruction was not just an accident, but part of a larger reset.
The mud flood anomaly. Cities half buried. Let us turn to one of the most controversial elements of the 17th century catastrophe, the mud flood phenomenon. All across the world, thousands of buildings show the exact same architectural anomaly. Doors buried below ground, windows underground, first floors completely submerged, basements that look like original ground-level entrances. You can see this in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Prague, Vienna, Amsterdam, Istanbul, Lviv, Paris, Edinburgh, Boston, Quebec, Delhi, Beijing. Too many cities show the same feature for it to be coincidence. Officially, historians say, oh, the streets were raised later. But raised by how much? 1 meter? 2? Yet many cities have buildings buried by 4 to 6 meters, sometimes more. This isn't street renovation. This is geological deposition. Massive amounts of mud, silt, ash, and debris settling over cities within a short time. But where did the mud come from? Theories include massive tsunamis, megavolcanoes, atmospheric dust events, global earthquakes, warfare using unknown weapons, a collapse of giant structures, ancient trees. Whatever the cause, the result is undeniable. Entire cities were partially drowned in mud, forcing survivors to dig out windows, build new doors on upper floors, and create new street levels above the buried past. This is the architectural fingerprint of a global cataclysm.
A world repopulated? After the catastrophe, something eerie happens in demographic records. Europe's population drops sharply in the early 1600s, then suddenly rebounds. But the rebound is too fast, far too fast for natural growth. In some regions, the population doubles within 40 years. How? With what families? With what infrastructure? With what food supply? Then we notice another pattern, an explosion of orphanages. From Russia to France to Spain to Austria, massive orphan houses appear in the mid-1600s, far larger than anything prior. Hundreds of thousands of parentless children suddenly appear. No documented families, no birth records, just children. Factories in early industrial centers Tula, the Urals, Amsterdam, Manchester are filled with these orphans. Workhouses expand at an impossible speed. Where did the children come from? Were they survivors of a catastrophe? Relocated populations? Remnants of a previous civilization? Or something even stranger? Some researchers suggest these children were not orphans at all, but populations relocated from destroyed regions. A reset needs labor. A reset needs workers. A reset needs a population that does not remember the world before. Whether or not this is true, the demographic data clearly shows the world was repopulated unnaturally fast. Someone wanted the world filled again.
Star forts, the geometry of a lost technology. Scattered across the world are thousands of enigmatic structures, star forts. Perfect geometric designs, 5-pointed, 8-pointed, 12-pointed, radiating bastions. Many appear almost identical, whether in Italy, Haiti, India, the Philippines, Russia, or Brazil. But here's the key. The technology to design these mathematically perfect structures did not exist in the 1600s. At least, not officially. Many star forts show underground tunnels fused by heat, melted stone, burned layers beneath them, massive earthworks requiring machines, not shovels. Did the survivors build them, or did the star forts survive the reset? Some researchers argue that star forts were part of a planetary energy grid, structures that could manipulate currents, resonance, vibration, a forgotten technology from a civilization wiped out in the 1600s. Whether true or not, the star forts represent something undeniable. A massive, global architectural system existed before the reset, and after the reset, we lost the ability to build them. The knowledge vanished, just like metallurgy, just like mapping, just like engineering. The reset didn't just destroy cities, it destroyed memory.
The calendar shift. Why did time change? Now comes one of the most suspicious details of all. Between the 1500s and 1700s, different countries changed their calendars at different times. When switching from Julian to Gregorian, many nations erased days, sometimes 10 days, sometimes 13 days. But why were the differences so large? Why did some nations refuse to make the change for centuries? Why do contradictory dates appear in numerous documents? Why do some events appear to happen twice, or not at all? Some historians quietly admit that the 16th, 17th century timeline is unstable. There are missing years, duplicated events, phantom rulers, chronological rearrangements. Could the calendar shift have been used to hide the timeline of the catastrophe? To bury the exact year of the reset? To synchronize surviving nations into a new global historical framework? We may never know the exact date, but the manipulation of time itself suggests the event was massive enough to require rewriting history. The rise of the new elites. Immediately after the chaos of the early 1600s, new political systems, new dynasties, and new elites appear almost everywhere. The Romanovs rise in Russia. The Habsburg dominance shifts. The Dutch Golden Age begins. The British Empire begins expanding. Mughal India enters a new phase. Qing China takes power. The Ottoman Empire rapidly restructures. It's as if the old world order died with the catastrophe, and a new one took its place. Many rulers have strangely vague biographies. Birth dates uncertain, origins unclear, early life undocumented. Were they truly founders, or simply survivors who took power over a reset world? The sudden creation of centralized states, colonial empires, and standardized religions hints that someone, or some group, stepped into the vacuum after the reset and shaped the modern world. History begins to look less like evolution and more like a controlled reboot.
Rebuilding a planet. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, humanity looks different. Cities rebuilt in new architectural styles. Navigation and maps recreated from scratch. Sciences rediscovered. Entire religious systems reorganized. New histories written. New borders drawn. New populations created. It's the birth of the world we live in today. But beneath the foundations of our modern cities lie the ruins of the lost one, the pre-reset civilization. Its traces are everywhere. Buried floors, melted stone,
impossible engineering, lost technologies, orphan populations, erased history. We are walking on the graves of a forgotten world. The reset was not just a disaster. It was a transformation.
The forbidden maps of the old world. There is a category of maps that traditional academia does not like to talk about. Maps that show coastlines before the ice existed. Maps that show cities in places where no city should have been. Maps drawn with the kind of precision that wasn't officially achieved until centuries later. Some of the most unsettling are the so-called anachronistic maps, created by cartographers who supposedly had no access to satellites, aerial views, or advanced surveying tools. Yet somehow their work looks like modern scans. The Piri Ray map, the Zeno map, the Orion Spinae projections, the mysterious Siberian charts discovered in forgotten archives. Many pieces appear to depict the world as it was before the 17th century catastrophe reshaped coastlines and erased entire regions. But the question is not simply how these maps were made. The question is who they were made for. Several old maps show vast inland seas in Eurasia and North America. They show river systems that no longer exist, or mountain ranges that appear softer, younger, less eroded. It's as if the mapmakers were recording a world in motion, one that was about to change violently. Some maps even depict cities in locations where archaeologists now find strange ruins buried beneath silt, mud, and sediment. Ruins that appear melted, ruins fused with minerals, ruins that show signs of seismic displacement. Were these maps warnings? Were they records of a civilization that sensed the coming catastrophe? Or were they the final artifacts left behind by an advanced world now lost beneath our feet? Whatever the truth is, one thing stands out. After the catastrophe, map-making begins again from zero. It's as if the knowledge of the old world was deliberately erased and replaced with a new geography, a new narrative, a new memory. This was not just a reset of cities, it was a reset of reality. The silent sky, astronomy after the reset. Another clue to the reset comes from the sky. Astronomical records before the 1600s show unusual events, mysterious comets, solar dimming, strange atmospheric halos, descriptions of nights bright as day, sky fire, red snow, black rains. Many of these appear in Chinese, Islamic, European, and American chronicles simultaneously, often within the same narrow time frame. But something strange happens after the mid-1600s. The sky becomes normal. Observations stabilize. Calendars standardize. Constellations are renamed. Planetary records are rewritten from scratch. It's almost as if humanity had to relearn the sky. When we look at the earliest scientific societies, the Royal Society in England, the Académie des Actions in France, they appear at the exact moment the reset ends, and their first priority is not physics or biology, it is astronomy. Why? What did they need to verify? What did they need to fix? What was wrong with the sky? Some researchers believe the catastrophe affected Earth's rotation or axial tilt. Others suggest a cosmic event, an impact, a debris field, or a solar outburst. Whatever happened, the reset may not have been purely terrestrial. It may have been astronomical. Civilizations obsessed with the stars suddenly forget how to read the sky. And then, just as suddenly, a new scientific order emerges to redefine it. The question is, were they discovering the universe or rebuilding it? The broken monuments of the old world.
Across the world stand structures we cannot recreate today. Not because we lack technology, but because we lack memory. Megaliths weighing hundreds of tons placed with micron-level precision. Pillars carved from single stones transported from quarries miles away. Perfectly aligned complexes built according to star patterns we no longer use. Buildings resistant to erosion, earthquakes, and time. Many of these structures were damaged or outright shattered during the 17th century catastrophe. Look closely and you see shear fractures, heat deformation, torsion damage, sudden structural displacement, as if a global force acted on them simultaneously. Examples stretch across continents. Göbekli Tepe partially buried. Angkor Wat surrounded by sediment layers. The pyramids showing upper-level erosion inconsistent with desert weathering. South American megalithic sites with stones shifted off their bases. Great medieval cathedrals, blackened, cracked, or missing key sections. Even more mysterious are the half-finished monumental projects, abandoned almost instantly around the same period. It's as if the old world was building something enormous, something global, and suddenly, without warning, the work stopped. What were they building? Why were they building it? And why was it never completed? Perhaps the project wasn't stopped by human hands. Perhaps it was stopped by the reset itself. The warnings left behind. There are messages across ancient architecture, warnings, symbols, carvings, reliefs that take on new meaning when viewed through the lens of the 17th century catastrophe. Images of great floods, fire from the sky, mountains splitting open, cities swallowed by the earth, people fleeing waves of mud, skies filled with dust and darkness. Myths echo these same themes: Norse Ragnarok, Hopi earth cycles, Hindu yugas, Mayan reset cycles, biblical apocalypse narratives, Sumerian flood epics, Chinese mandate of heaven resets. Were these stories metaphorical, or were they memories of previous resets? If the 17th century catastrophe was one reset, was it the first or the most recent in a repeating cycle? Perhaps ancient civilizations tried to warn us. Perhaps the signs were everywhere, but we forgot how to read them.
Who survived and why their story matters. When analyzing the aftermath of the reset, one pattern stands out clearly. The survivors were not evenly distributed. Some regions were devastated. Others were damaged but recoverable. Some seemed untouched. But the strangest category is the places that emerged stronger after the reset, regions that suddenly advanced in science, navigation, military power, and political influence. These include England, the Netherlands, Prussia, Russia, Qing China, early American colonies. Why did these regions rise? Why did they inherit the New World? Was it luck, geography, preparation, or something else? Some researchers propose that certain groups had foreknowledge of the coming catastrophe, that they were not caught by surprise, that they were ready to step into the vacuum left behind. This is where the narrative becomes uncomfortable. Because when you track the rise of new elites after the catastrophe, you begin to see something almost impossible to ignore. The modern world order did not emerge naturally. It emerged immediately after the reset, as if pre-designed. The survivors shaped the new world, and those who shaped the new world also shaped our history books. This means the story we have been told is not the story that happened. The Great Cover-Up begins. After the devastation, the survivors began to rebuild. But they didn't just rebuild cities, they rebuilt history. Step by step, they created new national histories. They destroyed or hid contradictory documents. They standardized languages. They redefined borders. They rewrote genealogies. They created new mythologies of identity. They reformatted timelines. They replaced old knowledge with new narratives. Evidence of the old world was burned, buried, banned, or branded as myth. By the early 1700s, the cover-up was complete. A new story, our story, was written over the ashes of the old one. Humanity was led to believe there was no cataclysm, no advanced civilization before, no missing history, no reset. Just a simple, linear evolution from ancient times to modernity. But linear history is a comforting lie. Reality is cyclical.
Clues hidden in plain sight. Even though the reset wiped most records, traces remain, hidden in the everyday world. Street grids that make no sense unless built over older ruins. Churches with doors buried underground. Colleges with libraries rebuilt from lost manuscripts. City squares that were once star fort centers. Bridges standing on top of older, melted supports. Foundations that extend far deeper than they should. Cathedrals with windows halfway below ground level. Official histories full of contradictions, overlaps, and unexplained gaps. Once you notice one anomaly, you cannot unsee the rest. The modern world is a palimpsest, a new story written over an erased one, and the erased story still bleeds through. What really caused the reset? There are several major theories explaining what triggered the 17th century catastrophe. None are fully proven, but all attempt to make sense of the evidence. 1. A solar superstorm. A solar event powerful enough to ignite fires, disrupt climates, and melt certain structures. 2. A long-cycle Earth reset. A megaquakes, tsunamis, and mudflows that resets civilizations every several centuries. 3. A cosmic encounter. A comet, asteroid field, or close planetary interaction triggering atmospheric ignition and global disasters. 4. Ancient technology failure. A global energy grid collapse, perhaps related to star forts, resulting in runaway resonance, firestorms, and destruction. 5. Human-engineered reset. A deliberate act of elites of the time to wipe the slate clean and rebuild the world under new control. 6. A mix of multiple forces. The most likely scenario. A natural cosmic or solar event triggered cascades of disasters, and surviving elites used the chaos to seize control and rewrite history. Whatever the true cause, the outcome was the same. Humanity began again, half blind, half forgetting, walking through the ruins of a world it no longer remembered. Are we heading toward another reset? This is the question people fear the most. If civilizations are cyclical, if resets happen periodically, if the 17th century catastrophe was simply the most recent, then where are we in the cycle now? Modern signs echo ancient ones. Strange atmospheric events, rapid climate instability, magnetic pole drift, power grid fragility, the return of solar extremes, global political restructuring, an accelerated centralization of power, a sudden push toward rewriting digital history, A worldwide shift to electronic records, easily erased, easily rewritten. It feels eerily familiar. Resets don't always announce themselves. They arrive quietly, then, all at once. And every reset has two phases: the collapse and the rewriting. We may be approaching one of them.
A message for the future. If you're watching this, you are part of a generation standing at the threshold of a new age. The world looks stable, but so did the world of the early 1600s, right before everything changed. This documentary is not just a story about the past, it's a reminder of something deeper. Civilizations are fragile. Memory is fragile. History can be rewritten. Entire worlds can disappear. But truth has a way of leaking through the cracks. The buried buildings, the melted stone, the missing years, the orphaned populations, the star forts, the forgotten maps, the rewritten sky, the sudden rise of new elites, the identical global disasters. All of it tells one story. A reset happened. And if a reset happened once, it can happen again. Humanity's greatest mistake is assuming that tomorrow will always look like today. History teaches us otherwise. Reality teaches us otherwise. The past is not dead. The past is buried, and we are walking on top of it. The question is not whether a reset occurred. The question is, will we be ready when the next one comes?